everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 9 of Tsurune. I have been on break, and I'm back, and I'm so excited because I was like, I need to see some Tsurune, and we left off, Shu is just making some waves, isn't he? Shu just shows up, and he's like, yeah, I've got history with the main protagonist, and I don't want anybody else to mess with him. And it's just like protection squad assembled from Minato. And God, Shu is so fascinating. He's such a quiet, stoic character, but there's like so much brewing under the surface. We were talking in the Discord, I think it's Wushin Suibin that said it's kind of like a little bit like Shizusumi from Given, where he's like very quiet under the surface, but there's like a storm raging within him from Minato. But yeah, there was a lot that happened in the last episode, quite a bit. The Rule of 8 did not let us down. No, a lot happened. We had Kaido dealing with Nanao and their relationship, Nanao trying to be a source of comfort for Kaido and a source of support, and Kaido's tsundere and doesn't know what to do with it, and so he's just like, grumble. And then Seiya gets his entire world rocked when Shu's like, Minato doesn't need a knight in shining armor, he's a king. And so it's like, ah! And so Seiya now, it's funny because rewatching the episode, I rewatched it just now before starting this one because it'd been over a week since I've watched the show. Seeing Seiya, who started out this season being like, no, if we're going to have this Kyoto club, we're going to be the best that we can be, and I'm going to be very serious about it. So Seiya puts his heart and soul into things, but what Shu is suggesting is, are you really doing it for yourself and because you want to do it, or are you just riding on the expectations of how it'll impact other people? And it's like, ugh. So yeah, that now Seiya's having an existential crisis. He was like our stable character, and now he's having an existential crisis. Ryohei's the most stable now, now that he's got his strings worked out. And yeah, Nanao is still mysterious. Kaido, I feel like we've gotten to where Kaido's issue is. Kaido's biggest enemy is himself. And I think once he realizes that and kind of gets to what Minato's figuring out, he'll be a lot better for it. But it wouldn't be a Kyoani sports anime without some angst. So, of course, we have to leave off with Shu. And Shu, like, just straight up confessing, being like, you came into my life and changed it. And so, you know, it's so crazy because Shu just confesses. He's like, you came into my life and rocked it. And now you're not able to compete. He's like, I don't accept that. He's like, you need to take responsibility for what you've done to my heart. And I'm like, what? So I loved in the comments, there was someone had commented on Patreon. They were like, I think it was like for Pazam or something. They were like, they're for Pez. They were like, can we do this? Are we allowed to do this? Because it's Shu's right up there. He's just like so blatant. Like, I told them there's no heterosexual explanation to him putting the hand in episode 7 when he puts the hand on the scar. I'm like, sports bros don't do that. So, none that I know. But yeah, I do have a couple comments before we start. Wushin Suibin, speaking of which, talked about how the twins, the mischievous twins, might have known Seiya and Minato from middle school at competitions. Makes sense. That checks out. And the non-binary Jitlung, I thought this was really cool, was saying that the titles of the episodes refer to terms within Kyudo. So like episode 2, for example, they're puns. So episode 2, for example, means unable to endure an arrow or shield, or at wit's end. And I was like, that makes sense. And then there were several others, but a poor fit in episode 4 refers to being unable to knock the arrow with the bow. And I'm like, oh, cool. And then I was questioning back in episode 5, I was like, frequent messenger, what does that mean? But non-binary Jitlung said that a frequent messenger is someone who does something rapidly by means of using an arrow. Like just firing very quick, kind of like what the twins do. And I was like, oh. So that was really interesting. I mean, some of the titles are pretty easy to understand and decipher, like Reunion in episode 7, that one's pretty easy. And then Taking Aim, that one's pretty easy. But some of them, like the Frequent Messenger, I was like, what is that? And they're all puns referring to firing an arrow or used in Kyudo. So I thought that was cool. So thank you. But yeah, those are my comments. I'm glad to be back watching Tsurune. I feel really excited because we're gonna go right into season 2. I figured it up that by the time I finish season 1 in the OVA, will be a few weeks into when season 2 will premiere. I'm not going to start season 2 right as it premieres because I want to finish this season first. But with that being said, we'll just go straight into it from here. So it'll give you guys a couple weeks to watch ahead and know what's to come. And that'll give me time, I'm hoping, to watch ahead and be able to keep up and talk about it in the Discord and on Patreon and things like that. But we'll see. I'm excited that we're just going to go right into season 2. It makes me feel good. I'm like, cool, we're just going to dive right in. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I poured myself a little bit of a night hot tea and coffee. A little coffee for the evening, some decaf. Don't want to be staying up till 2 a.m. But even though it's Tsurune. And so I'm excited to see what all we get into. So let's find out, shall we? We're going to start episode 9 of Tsurune. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh! Tsurune! What? This series, you might as well prepare the last 3 to 4 minutes of this show. It's gonna be you're gonna just be like bumping along, everything's going smooth, and the last 3 to 4 minutes, they're like, oh my god. Well, I'm glad I didn't get spoiled about that, because just like swept the rug out from under me. I was like, I thought, he was like, oh, hey, I thought in that moment when we saw Minato look back at Seiya and was like, give him the thumbs up, I wondered if we were going to cut to like another scene of them like at a tournament or something and starting out middle school archery and then the mom would die. No, it was that moment where he stopped him and brought the attention back to him. And in that moment they were hit. Oh my god. But I mean, I'm like, Seiya, you can't blame yourself from that, because even if that 1 second of him looking back, that didn't change. Like, they would have still been in the road and it still would have been the same thing. It's just, I know it's the fact that Seiya's like, that was the one moment it happened, but god, oh my gosh. And the fact that he was like unconscious for 10 days. His dad's the doctor that worked on him, the physician. It all makes sense now. It makes sense why Minato was on good terms with Seiya's dad, because he helped him. Yeah, it all makes sense. Yep, and why the family's so close. God, and then like the whole... It makes just a mess of a triangle between Seiya and Shu and Minato. A mess of a triangle. That is absolutely right. And then you throw Masa in there. Oh my god. And poor Seiya. And then how Masa views him and connects him to like him and his own teacher. Oh my gosh. And then the Shu's grandma who's like wanting them to get match made right now. Oh my god. What was this episode? And then the conversation. I had to bring Whiteboard-kun out for a number of reasons, because the connection, the web of relationships needs to be... KyoAni is great at many things. They are great at animating water. They are great at comfort anime. And they are great at intricate Nakama webs of relationships between characters in sports anime. And I'm like, ah! So yeah, there's a lot to talk about in this episode. And I wanted to go back, I wanted Whiteboard-kun out to map the relationships of where everybody is at. And then also because that whole dinner scene where they're making the food, I thought that like their conversation was a big overarching metaphor to where all the characters are at the moment and their philosophies on archery. But Minato's in a great place. We started this series with Minato like at the lowest of the lows. He's doing just fine. It's everyone else that's having issues. And of course it's Seiya. Of course it would be Seiya who's the consistent one. And we've taken for granted this entire series that Seiya's been the one who's been the level-headed person. And now he's like, why do I have all this stress on me? So, oh my gosh. But just like, whew, it felt like an arrow to the heart. And then the fact they use the arrow sounds like as just a metaphor in this. Oh, God. Oh my gosh. Typically, in a 3-act structure, you end your second act and you move into your third act. And there's usually two ways you can go about it. You can either have your second act end where everybody's getting pumped up for the final act and they all rally together and go straight forward into the build to the climax. Then there's the climax and then there's the resolution. That's one way of doing it. Another way that you can start out your final act is that your characters are at their lowest points. And then you spend the rest of the act figuring out what do we do about this and how do we rally up to the climax to end things on a high note if we can. That's where Tsurune is, because yeah, by this they've all made progress, but like Tame Sensei in his wisdom says, like any new light creates more shadows. So he's like, yeah, it's great they're getting better, but that just reveals more issues that they have to take care of. So everybody is struggling with something at this point. Minato's just somehow is like the most straightforward. Minato's like, I got target panic. I know what it is. I know what I got to do. I just got to work on it. Minato's pretty much like solved myself. It's now everybody else coming to terms with their own inner demons. And it's like, oh my gosh. And even Masa. I'm like, drag Masa-san into this. Oh my gosh. And then Shu's over here like plotting his wedding. Like, I did not expect a damn love triangle until episode 7. Episode 7 comes along and it's like, I was just like, oh no, Minato and Seiya, they're friends. They're BFFs. I don't sense anything. And then in the span of 3 episodes, this show's like, are you sure? And I'm like, oh, I see it now. But it's so crazy. Oh my gosh. So let's go through this episode proper. I feel like we need to. So, okay. So we just need to map out where everybody is at this point in the story and just start. We're going to put Minato in the center, right? Because I feel like Minato, he needs to go right here in the center. Minato's situation's pretty easy. He still has target panic. Okay. And Masa throughout this gives them all something to work on at the start of this, except Seiya. Doesn't give Seiya any advice. But his whole thing with Minato is about his composure. He's like his composure and his form. He's like, if you get those down, you'll be fine. So I'm going to put Kaido, I guess, right over here. Because Kaido is not our big focus in this episode. We get some focus with Kaido. But we get some there where Masa's talking to him at the beginning of the episode that he needs to focus on his form as well. He needs to focus on that form and not pushing or rushing. His big thing with Kaido is, Masa's thing with Kaido is like, you're trying to make a result happen rather than let the result be the result. He's like, you're trying to make the end goal be something you can physically create, when he's like, that's not how this works. You don't create the result. You do things and the result happens because you do those things. He's like, you can't just automatically make your bow turn. You can force it, but that's not the point. So he's trying to get Kaido to like get out of his head and just go back to what you're good at. Quit trying to force things. And Kaido is just getting frustrated. He's like, you need to keep your right hand straight. And he's like, okay. And then he says Ryohei's center is off. So we're going to put Ryohei over here. That Ryohei, he says that his center is off. Because Ryohei's kind of been like the glue holding like the crew together. Ryohei's such a damn golden retriever that everybody likes him. And you can't really be mad at him. And so he's basically giving Ryohei kind of the same advice that he gives Minato about the string at the top of your head and imagining that composure, that center. Once you find your center, you are sure to win. He's basically, giving the Donny Osmond speech to Ryohei, right? And so I do like they have the chart of all the different dots, hits, and misses that they've had throughout their practices. That's pretty cool. And so you know what the weirdest thing is? We have this Minato doing this narration about their perspective broadening bit by bit. And they're all, you know what it reminded me of in the weirdest ways? For some reason, it reminded me of like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie from 1993, like the live action one. It reminded me of like, I just kept picturing April O'Neil giving this dramatic monologue being like, the boys' perspective was opening bit by bit, but they still weren't complete. Something was missing. Like, I just imagine it, right? It's the weirdest reference, but I just kept thinking about it. And so we're thinking about things bit by bit more, about archery and about ourselves. Put that on a damn cross stitch, right? Put that on a cross stitch right now. So yeah, we'll get past this OP. All right. So in any case, I like that Masa, we learned some things about Masa in here too, right? We learned some things about him. He's like, Seiya's always so stable. He doesn't have anything to say to Seiya because Seiya is stable. So we're going to put Seiya over here. He is constantly known as being stable and reliable. And that is a hard row to hoe if you're not into it, right? Because there are some people that are just naturally good leaders, or naturally they pick up on things and they're just naturally fine at them, right? Like Seiya's just really stable and consistent. But if your heart's not into it, then it's hard to fight for something, right? And Masa tries to tell him that at the end. He's like, you know, anybody that loves archery, even if they lose their way, that love will bring them back to the activity. It'll bring them back to the center. But if you don't have love for it and you start to stray away, what are you going to do about that? And then Seiya just, you know, drops a giant bomb on Masa's head after it. But yeah, he's good just like that. And then that's the first time he missed. He's like, oh, sorry, I shouldn't have spoken up. And he says, no, you're fine. It's my own fault. And then, yeah, and it's great that Minato is trying to picture. He's trying to picture what happened and recreate it. And the thing about it is that Masa, Seiya says, don't rush it, okay? And he goes to say something to Minato, and Masa cuts right in. He's like, don't rush it. And he's like, once you have your stance, try to imagine looking down at yourself from above. And he's like, yes, view yourself objectively. Concentration is important, but you need composure as well. And he's like, sure, I'll try it. And that's hard because you have Masa. I'm going to put Masa-san over here. That Masa is able to offer advice and has wisdom, but he also speaks from a point of passion as well. He likes archery a lot, and so he's able through that to speak not only from experience, but he can tie it in a way that Minato and the others will understand because they're archers, they know the lingo, he can make it make sense. And I feel like Seiya hates that about him because Seiya's like, I want to give Minato advice. He's like, but I can't be you, I'm not a coach. And it's one of those things where you try to tell somebody something over and over again and it doesn't click, but then someone else comes along and says the exact same thing and you're like, and suddenly it makes sense to them. And Seiya, I think Seiya is insecure. He's insecure about how easily Masa and Shu relate to Minato. That's the thing. Right? I get Makoto vibes from Seiya from Free. If we're going to compare Free characters to this, I get Makoto vibes from Seiya. Makoto's like a stable character in Free. Seiya is much more stoic and studious, seemingly, than Makoto, but they both have that like stable core. But I feel like with Seiya, what he struggles with is the fact that he's like, I'm not super passionate about this. I'm just doing it because the person I like is doing it. And it works out. So it's kind of like in Free, without spoiling anything, Makoto kind of goes through a situation where he, at first, didn't maybe care for swimming, but a character encouraged him to do it, and so he kept doing it because of that, and then he came to like it. But that's the thing. In Free, Makoto came to like the event, and he grew his own identity within it and loved the activity for a certain reason that was his own. Seiya does not seem to have that. Seiya just started Kyudo because Minato wanted to start doing it, and Seiya wanted to be closer to Minato. So he just was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do this activity with you so we can hang out all the time and be together. Sure, but Seiya doesn't really, there's nothing about that Seiya seems connected to. And now looking back throughout the series so far, every time we've really seen Seiya in the activity, he's been looking for Minato. It's like Minato is his anchor to this activity. He has no other reason to be there except for Minato. And but the thing of it is, he's gotten decent at it and other people have come to rely upon him. So he's like, if Minato's not here, then what do I do? What do I do with myself? So I feel for Seiya because he's like, I haven't been able to carve out this in my own way. So I'm kind of lost. He's kind of lost out at sea, right? It's very interesting. And so Tommy Sensei talks about everything. And so Masa says that he's going to be late for a couple practices because his shrine keeps him busy. And he's like, the Amatsu Star Festival. And I love that all the girls, like, they instantly gather around Masa and Tommy Sensei being like, what's the gossip? Like, the other guys are still doing whatever, but the girls are like, we want to know the tea. What's up, Masa-san and Tommy Sensei? And he says, in August, we have a festival to pray for the well-being of our shrine. Masa is very spiritual. He's like, and in the run-up to that, we hold various rituals. Like, I get very, Your Name, that movie Your Name, I get very much vibes from it where his family is like very tied to like the spirituality with the shrine and they do all the rituals. And Yuna's like, oh, you sound like a Shinto priest, coach. He's like, not almost, I am a priest. And they're like, oh, so Masa is a Shinto priest. I'm not surprised. Maybe not a Shinto priest. He might just be a priest. But yeah, he's a priest. Which kind of fits his personality, right? Because he's not aggressive. He's very just kind of laid back, go with the flow. And I could see why Masa would not get along with his grandfather because Masa's kind of like, no, I just want to do this because I like it, not because you're making me. I do like that he's like just an ordained priest. And so they talk about not having much time before the tournament and needing to practice, and they decide to have like a follow-up meeting to go over what they screwed up on and what they can improve upon for the tournament. And Nanao, let's talk about Nanao. We'll put Nanao over here. Nanao is keeping everyone on task. I like that about Nanao. You need a friend in your group on any competitive team. Somebody has to be the one to say, we're practicing, we're doing it here, we're doing it now. Let's go. Someone has to be the task organizer. And that seems to be Nanao. Because Kaido's just like, we gotta practice, but he doesn't know any specific details. Minato's like, and Ryohei's like, I don't know what to do. So I like that Nanao's like, no, here's what we need to do. This is why we need to do it. Let's get it organized. And so Minato says, you won't realize if you truly know until you get out there. And Kaido's like, what are you saying? What is this? What's this poetic speech you're giving? It's too highbrow for us. And he's like, talk more simply. Kaido's like, dumb it down for us plebeians in the back. And Minato says, even if we hear the words, if we don't accept them, they won't really stick. Seiya says that. So it's funny that Seiya says the idea that we can say one thing, but we have to believe it for it to sink in. And that's Seiya's problem. He's like, I can only go so far because I don't really believe in this activity. I'm just doing it for Minato. And when Masa looked down at the chart, when Minato wasn't there, Masa looked down at the chart and saw Seiya had missed everything from him not being there. He's like, He's like, I get it. You're doing this because of Minato. You're not really in this for yourself. And the crazy thing is that Shu kind of called him out on it in the last episode. Shu was like, you're going to plateau. You're only going to go so far because you're not invested in this. Shu is like, if you don't love archery, you're going to become stagnant and you're never going to excel. You're always going to plateau at this certain peak, and that's all you can do. And Shu kind of called him out on it. So we'll put Shu over here, because we're going to talk about Shu when we get to him and his grandmama. His grandmama, who is like maybe she got connections. I'm like, if she competed with Tommy Sensei and the grandpa of Masaki, girl, do it. So yeah, he says, right, Minato, and he's like, yes, that's exactly what I was trying to say. And they said, that's our Seiya. When it now said, that's our Seiya, it was like, It's like everybody is relying upon Seiya to be the middleman. And I feel like Seiya is just kind of done. Seiya at this point, he's like, I don't want to be, because that's what Seiya's becoming. He's realizing that he's becoming the middleman between Shu and Minato, and Shu's like, you need to get out of the way. If you're not going to be invested in this for yourself, you need to get out and let us who are invested move on up. And I'm sure Seiya just feels kind of static right now, right? So they decide to go to the restaurant, and they do question a few things. They were like asking Minato if he's a science type. I forget, in Japan they're like, are you the science type? Are you the math type? They say Minato is the literature type, which I'm very much the literature type as well. And because Kaido's like, if he was the science mind, he'd form sentences with clarity, which I feel like Seiya is the science mind. And Seiya's there looking at his hand, like grabbing his hand there, like, and it's kind of like every time an anime has a character looking at their hand, like referencing, like, why am I doing this? What is the point? And he's just like, I don't know. Like, I don't have a grip. It's like he doesn't have a grip on the situation. But it's so sweet that Minato's in a great place in this episode. He has like the little chuckle and the laugh. He's having a great time. He's hanging out with his buddies. He seems happy. And Seiya's just like, all he can do is stare at Minato. And it's just like, that's all he sees in his vision. And so Kaido is the sports-minded approach. And so they make a big deal about Nanao inviting the girls, which honestly, I think, again, going back to Nanao, I think Nanao only invites the girls because he wants the team. He wants the team together, right? He wants the team to be together. And so he's like, yeah, invite everybody. He's like, of course I want the girls to come, right? Whether or not that's entirely true. He's like, I'm excited about Kyudo talking about it. He's like, I'm ready to set this up. And I like the Kyle's like, sure. And I was like, I like the idea of this. This seems like it'll be good. And Kaido's like, what do you think, Seiya? And he's like, it's fine to me. And so, yeah, of course, he's excited. So meanwhile, we go to the shrine where the grandma is sitting in her beautiful kimono. And I don't know if she still does Kyudo or not, or if she's unable to, kind of like Tommy Sensei. She's too old to do it. But Shu just goes to his grandma with all his boyfriend gossip. He's like, Grandmama, I met Minato again, and this is how it went down. I was like, I like that he goes to his grandma to give her the hot gossip about the guy he likes. And she says, oh, Minato is... And he's like, yes, he doesn't seem fully restored yet. But, says, that's just fine. I'm just happy to know he's still shooting. I love that you see her now. Back when they were kids, she looked so larger than life. She looked like this big, tall, proud woman. And she still does, but she seems so much smaller compared to Shu now. Like, he's a grown up and he's a young man, and he seems bigger than her. And he has, like, the outfit sitting next to him. So the grandma's just happy that Minato's still shooting, right? And so Shu says, I agree. I think he'll be the old Minato again soon. So this is interesting. This is interesting because Shu wants the old Minato back. And we'll talk about this more because when Minato and Seiya are like walking back and they have that conversation, Minato makes the comment that he is not who he was before. He's like, I'm not who I was before. And Minato's like, but that's okay. He's like, I can take a different path. It's fine. And so there's, of course, this big, triangle between Seiya and Shu and Minato, because you have Minato who is evolving and changing who he was and developing. He's developing as a character and blooming, kind of like in the OP, we see the flower behind Minato with the bicycle wheel. With the bicycle wheel. Oh my gosh. Oh, it all makes sense now. Oh, yep, with the bicycle wheel. Damn it. Okay. But he's blooming and developing into his own person, right? And Shu, here's the thing. Shu seems that he knows. Well, that's interesting because I was going to say Shu only knows Minato from middle school, but he doesn't. He knows him before that. So Shu knows, he knows Minato before and after the accident. But he wants the old Minato back before the target panic. Right? I think Shu wants the competitive Minato back that wanted to hear the Tsurune sound because he knows Minato from before and after the accident, so he knows how he was, and he wants that enthusiasm and passion back. And I think that's what Minato is working towards. It's just going to be a little bit different than how he was previously, right? And Seiya just seems so lost because he's like, he doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know how he can have a part in this, if he even gets a part in it. And I like that the grandma, she says, oh, the old Minato, eh? Him, huh? And then, Shu just staring out there. Shu is so intimidating. He's just such like a quiet fury, right? Shizusumi, great analogy, great comparison. And she says, I do wonder what possessed him to go against Kurosaki High, though. And Shu has it all figured out. He's like, oh, well, I suspect he wanted a fresh start. Or perhaps it was a show of determination. Shu was like looking through this in a very optimistic light. That's interesting to note. Shu is saying that Minato chose Kazumi for a fresh start and basically as a challenge to himself. The thing that's funny about that is from what we know in the series, Minato went to Kazumi to escape archery, to run away from it, which kind of ties to the fresh start. But Minato was originally not wanting to challenge himself. No, he wanted to just get away from archery and forget about it because of the mess up at finals. And Seiya was the one who drug him. So it's crazy because it's like, Shu gives Minato a big benefit of the doubt, saying that Minato is going to come back to archery eventually. He makes the comment saying, well, he said in the last episode, he's like, well, no matter what happens, Minato would have came back one way or another. I'm like, no, he would not have, I don't think. I don't think if Seiya hadn't worked with Ryohei to drag him back there, I don't think he would have. I don't think if Masa, Seiya, and Ryohei had done what they did back in episodes like 1 through 3, Minato would not be doing archery. So that's very curious that Shu wants to give all the credit to Minato, saying, oh, he would come back. He loves archery, sure. But Shu doesn't understand like how bad things were. And Seiya definitely understood, and Ryohei and Masa were willing to help. So yeah, it's curious that Shu gets on to Seiya and was like, you need to leave him alone and go away. When I'm like, dude, Seiya is one of the reasons that Minato is even there doing Kyudo. So I don't know if you should be insulting him. So it's crazy interesting, right? And also that makes a sense that Shu and Seiya view Minato very differently from the start of the series. Like at the start of the series, Seiya actually had a very pessimistic view of Minato. He's like, well, Minato's not going to do this unless we do this, this, and this. He had a very pessimistic view, whereas Shu has a very optimistic view. He's like, no, he'll get there. He'll do it. It's like, so I don't know. I guess if you ship Seiya and Minato, cool. If you ship Shu and Minato, cool. I feel like it's the big Makoto Ren Haru debate all over again. Like, where do you go with it? What do you do? Right? And she goes, I see. Kazumi, you said. He says, yes. I believe Morioka 6 Dan took over there this year. So she calls Tommy Sensei Morioka 6 Dan. So she's like, he's like the 6th Morioka. She's like, she knows Tommy Sensei. Her and him got history, right? And she's like, I competed against him many moons ago. And she's like, and they had a young man serving as their coach. And here she's like, a young man? What? The Kyudo Association doesn't hire any coaches under the age of 40. What? And she was like, yes, early to mid-20s. Tall, dark navy hair, really hot. He doesn't say that, but she's like, who could it be? Those in the Kyudo Association with the necessary coaching skills. There aren't many men it could be. So she's like, there aren't many men in the Kyudo Association that are young like that could be a coach. She's like, I don't know. Narrows our search a bit. And then she's like, I wonder, could it have been that man who spurred Minato's revival? And Shu! His face! So maybe Seiya and Shu, they're looking at it the wrong way. Guys, they can come to terms. Seiya and Shu just need to both sit down and look at each other and go, we both hate Masa-san. Because I feel like Shu, whenever she says that, she's like, could that man have been the one that spurred Minato's revival? Shu's just staring at her like, it wasn't Minato that made himself come back. Someone else had influence and I wasn't there. I feel like poor Masa-san's like, I'm just trying to like motivate some kids, y'all. What we doing? Because I feel like both Seiya and Shu do not like the fact that Masa has helped Minato. I'm like, what? No. But he says yes. He says yes. Yeah. So there's an interesting thing here where I feel like both Seiya and Shu have acknowledged to themselves that Masa is one of the reasons Minato came back. But he's not the sole reason. I mean, he's a big reason, but he's not the sole reason, right? So I feel like to Minato, I feel bad because there's this like love square going and Minato's the least aware of the whole thing. Minato's like, wait, what's happening? So, because yeah, you have Shu and Seiya off here catfighting in the woods over who loves Minato more. They're fighting with Masa saying that he's this creep over here that's getting Minato back into Kyudo. And the thing of it is, all three of them are motivators to Minato. Minato's like, yeah, Masa inspired me when I was at my lowest. I needed somebody like Masa in my life at that time. But he's also like, Seiya was persistent and kept me motivated whether I liked it or not, and pushed me back into archery whether I liked it or not. So he's responsible. And he's like, in the back of my head, I wanted to see Shu again and compete against him, so he's responsible too. So for Minato, he's like, yeah, all three of you had a part. And they're just like fighting off in the distance. So we go to the Okonomiyaki Shigeo. We go there and they're like, let's make it official. Great job in the professional preliminaries, everyone. I love Ryohei's like, yeah, I like Nanau's like, we did it. And Ryohei's like, yes. Like their son Kaido's like, I love Kaido's reaction where he's like, great job, everyone. And like, what are you going to get, Seiya? And like, mochi, that'll weigh down your stomach. I love the girls are off at their own table like, these boys are so freaking loud. It's great. But Yuna seems okay with it. She's like, well, they're cheerful at least. And Shigaraku's like, what do we do? So yeah, this is one of those restaurants where you fry up your own stuff, which I would be okay with. I love that Ryohei just mixes it all together. So this is the big conversation about how they make their food and what it says about their personalities. So Ryohei mixes it all equally. Ryohei is all about everyone getting along. Everything's mixed together. We're all just in this big, giant soup together, and it's fine. He's like, oh. And I liked it when I was like, hey, it's up to him how he makes it, right? And Kaido's like, no, you'll lose the crispy fluffiness. Kaido is technical, and as Nanao calls him, a fundamentalist. We do things by the book, darn it. There's a rhyme and reason to everything. And Nanao's like, no, he's a fundamentalist. He's like, yes. And he's like, don't call me that. And you put that on too soon. And he's like, Seiya, did you mix that properly? Yeah. He says the cabbage isn't fully mixed. I like that he's like, they've been to enough of those restaurants to know how each other is. And I love that Ryohei just makes the K for Kazumai. He's such a sweetheart. I love him. Playing with your food. It's cute. So yeah, Nanao is pretty much, Nanao is basically in the middle. He's not extreme, right? He's kind of like Ryohei where he wants things to be balanced. He is. Yeah, he's balanced. Balance is a good word for it. He's balanced. He doesn't take things too seriously, but doesn't blow him off either. He just kind of keeps right there in the middle, right? And he's like, here's some pics from the training camp. And he's like, and here are from the preliminaries. And the ones that Rin took. I like that Ryohei wants to see some of them. They're proper pictures. Okay. So I like that Shigu and Nanao are the only ones that put the bacon on their omelets. They put them on top. Interesting. And she feels bad because she got sick. And she's like, I should have been more careful day to day. And Nanao's like, no, you can't blame yourself from that. You're just going to kick yourself and make yourself feel bad. And Kaido's like, well, Kirasaki's going to be upping their game as well. So, and there'll be other strong schools too. So we established the other strong schools. We have Wakura and Matsuyuki. I wonder if we don't see these other teams in this season, if in season 2 we'll get some of them. That might be fun. Get another team in there. That could be a fun time. See what's up with them. But I really like this. If this were baseball or soccer, we could look up our opponent's weaknesses as they flip the omelet over. So in this sport, you cannot know the opponent's weakness. Which is kind of cool because, yeah, it's all you're fighting against yourself, but it's fine. And I like that they're putting the sauce over it, right? Getting all things. It's like in Kyudo, you can't do that. You do well in the clutch, so you prefer that, I bet. He's like, yeah, that's part of it. He's like, I can be a clutch person. And he's like, the Doppel brothers seem to have that going for them too. And Minato's like, even at their speed, they hit the target again and again. And basically the idea of shooting to hit. So they say that for the twins, they're good at shooting to hit. That they're good at what they do, right? And so Kaido then gets onto Ryohei for cutting it a certain way. He's like, you don't cut it that way. He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, the rule is to cut it in a cross. So here's the thing, though. Ryohei cut into, he had on there 7 equal slices. But the idea is that he cut it into equal slices, but he made so many of them that everyone could have a piece if they wanted to. That's kind of Ryohei's personality, right? And then now says, no, you cut it in the cross. It's a rule. He's like, who cares how he cut it? And then Kaido says it shows a lack of thinking. It's easier to eat if you cut in a cross. So Nanao's whole thing is that it's easier. He's like, work smarter, not harder, and be efficient. It's Nanao's whole thing. He's like, be efficient, work smarter, not harder, and it will be better that way. And Kaido's like, in the end, it's a question of style. He's like, the relevant to the question of whether to do archery for competition or for philosophy's sake. So Kaido says that it's all to do with style. And are you choosing competition or philosophy? Are you doing this activity as like a spiritual event, or are you competing? And for Kaido, it seems like he's competing, right? Whether you focus on accuracy or focus on form, the path is everlasting. So he says that the path is there. The path is there. It's just how do you walk it? And I feel like Minato is going to touch base on that here in just a second, right? But Nanao's like, eh. And so they all go. And so Minato knows that Seiya, he likes things spicy. And Minato knows that about him. They've been friends long enough to know that about themselves. And they're like, I guess they could see it, right? And they bet that Ryohei likes sweet things. He's like, yes. And so they say that he likes it spicy. Ryohei is a sweet cinnamon bun. Of course he is. And then Kaido has the cat's tongue. I think that Sasaki and Miyano had a cat's tongue, which was that, did that mean you were good or bad at kissing? One of the two. And then I was like, yes, that's it. And they're like, now. Oh, he says, they're trying to figure something out with the now. And then poor Kaido, he's like, leave me alone. But Seiya, he doesn't say anything. He just goes over at Minato. I feel like it's bad because Seiya just doesn't. I feel like Seiya's always been there, but they haven't focused on Seiya, and Seiya hasn't added anything to the conversation, so he just is stagnant there. He's not bringing anything to the table because he doesn't really care. He just cares about Minato. And so then, yeah, they all leave there to go. And now that whole thing, the whole ED, everything with the bicycle all makes sense now. I'm like, oh, I wouldn't ride a bicycle again after that. Well, I guess it's part of it. You just got to go through it and get through it. And Manala's like, everybody's thinking about all these different things. He's like, whether you should fire a good shot or an accurate shot. So Minato says that everybody is thinking about good versus accurate. Like, do you want something that looks flashy and is like, bombastic, or do you want something that's like consistent? And he's like, back in middle school, I thought I had to be perfect in both. And so I like this idea that, again, talking about how Shu expects the old Minato to be, he wants that like super hyper competitive perfectionist to come back. And Minato's like, yeah, in middle school, I thought I had to be a perfectionist. I thought I had to be great in both. He's like, I thought it was natural that one person could do both. But now that I think about it, it's not like that at all. It's a bit like mountain climbing. I like the mountain climbing metaphor quite a bit. And I wish that I felt like the mountain climbing metaphor would kind of solve Seiya's problems, but I don't know if he gets it or not in this episode. Because he's saying mountain climbing. He says there's all kinds of routes and each person walks at their own pace. So there's many routes and everyone is at their own pace. And he says from there that no one else can carry you up. He says no one can carry you. It's like everybody's at their own pace. Nobody can carry you. There's various routes, but you can climb together. So that's the thing. I thought that was going to solve. I thought Seiya was going to get that and be like, that's his big deal, right? Because that pretty much solves the whole thing with Shu, right? Because Shu was telling him, he's like, you shouldn't keep chasing Minato. You need to just back off and let him do his own thing. But Minato's kind of contrasting what Shu told him in the last episode. Minato's saying no. He's like, mountain climbing, there's all these different routes. We all go at our own pace. We are all our own individual doing the task, but we're doing the task together. We're not alone. We're together doing it at our own pace. So yeah, that's the answer to Shu's, trying to get Seiya to back off. I'm like, Minato just gave a nice rebuttal to that without even realizing he's making a rebuttal to Shu's case against Seiya. And I don't think Seiya gets it. And it's like, Also want to make note that Minato looks great in this scene. Like, he looks the best he's looked the whole series because he's come to these startling revelations. He's like, I'm not really sure though. And Seiya kind of smiles at him. He's like, I think I get it. He says he understands it, but then I'm like, then why are you so angsty later? He's like, I got target panic. I still have it. But if I keep looking up and aiming for the summit, then I might get better someday. And that's what I think now. And he's just so sweet, right? So he's like, I know I gotta keep going, and it's fine. And Seiya's just like, oh. And he has that exact same look on his face like he did when he had the accident. Oh, God. And so they end up going. And the thing of it is that we get inside Seiya's room, right? It's very clean, very prim and proper. He's got a sweet coffee table. but he looks over, and so he thinks back to Shu and Masa, and where Shu's telling him to stop chasing Minato, and I'm like, but he's not chasing him, or he doesn't have to be. But then, oddly enough, I thought he was gonna like look up Fujiwara and try calling him because they knew each other. I thought he was like gonna call him because they have each other's numbers, but instead he looks at Masaki. He looks at Masa-san and gets 0 results for looking him up. Okay. That's interesting. Right? That's interesting because I wonder if Seiya is questioning if Masa's a sham or not. Maybe because, I mean, the thing of it is, Masaki, his grandfather was a well-known archer. So, but Masaki, there's no results on him. You think that there'd be like if he won a competition or something, or like won something or had a prize, that he'd be in like the local news or something and would show up on a Google search. The fact that he did a Google search and nothing showed up. So, did he change his name? Or will Seiya be like, you're a sham, you're not who you say you are, but Minato like believes you and wants to eat out of your palm? That's going to be interesting moving forward to see what we get with that. And then he says the Pucky Sticks. Now, when the Pucky Sticks box pops out, at that point I was like, oh, he really does like Minato. Because, again, there is no heterosexual explanation. I don't know many guys that keep Pocky Stick boxes from their first friend. You just don't normally do that. When you have a crush on somebody, you keep treasures from them, sure. But they're so cute here, like them getting to know each other. And then, and of course, okay, another thing too. Minato's icon is a damn bicycle. Are you a masochist? No, what? No. Okay. Like, make it your glove or something. Why is it the bicycle? And then Seiya has the picture of Kuma. But here's the thing. Seiya adds on there, I hope everything's okay. From experience, when you like somebody, you don't just text, okay, gotcha. If you romantically like somebody, you find a little way to add that. You add that little line in, right? And it's a subtle little way of saying that you care without saying that you care, right? If you just said, okay, got it, thanks, dunzo. But the fact of being like, hope everything's okay, it's that extra line, the implication, right? It's there. And then it doesn't help the fact that Minato sends back, thanks, like in big, beautiful pink and orange and red letters. If you had a crush on him, then yeah, that'll about do it. That'll about do it. And so the idea of the chapter is called An Unshown Hand is interesting. Because an unshown hand gives me the idea, I'm sure that there's a pun related to archery with it involved, but it makes me think of the idea that you're not showing who you really are in this situation. And that's kind of where Seiya is. Seiya has always put on this facade, this persona of being all put together, stable and reliable, when under the surface, Seiya is freaked out, listless, as his father says, and just apathetic and doesn't care. He's just doing it for Minato because he loves him. Ugh. And so they ask if he still goes to the hospital, and they're like, yeah, it took him 10 days to regain consciousness. It was a serious accident. And then he's like, yeah. The Takahaya Hospital. Yeah, for where his dad works. Okay. So like, it's they have their own hospital. Okay. And then Minato, our boy Minato, being all buff there. You won't need regular checkups anymore. He's like, thank you for helping me for so long. And then I love that, yeah, it's cute because Seiya kind of looks like his dad, but he looks a lot like his mom. He's like, you're always looking after Seiya. He's like, hardly. And they ask if that's where the scar on Minato's side came from, and he's like, yes. And of course, it makes sense now why Seiya is so, like, doesn't want to talk about it, because Seiya, he feels responsible. I thought, way back in episodes like 4 and 5, I thought it was something like, oh, well, he didn't talk to Minato when he got target panic. And so, no, it's more serious than that. He believes he was responsible for his mother dying and for him being unconscious for 10 days. Oh, that's a big deal. Yeah, he feels responsible. And so all of this makes sense now that he's been following Minato around, trying to, like, atone for his sins. And it's like, no, I don't think Minato blames him at all. And it's like, dude, Seiya just, like, you get this big dose of his character and you're like, oh my gosh, his motivations make so much sense now. And so when Shu told him to just leave Minato alone, of course Seiya would be frustrated because he'd be like, you don't understand. This is my fault. I can't just let him go. Oh my gosh. And they're like, he's fine though, right? And Seiya says, probably. And the thing of it is, too, is that for Seiya, he's like, well, Minato may be fine, but I've got to live with this guilt of this, so what about me, too? Like, just... But he can't tell him that because... Oh, God. And they're all like... Oh, and Ryohei's like, Seiya, what's up? And they just notice that he's off. And then we have the flashback where we see that Minato went to hang out with Shu. So there's this crazy thing that Minato is hanging out with Shu all those months practicing and getting to know him. Shu, like, developed a crush on Minato. Seiya's had a crush on Minato. These two guys both have a crush on him, and Minato's just like, what? Say what? Oh my gosh. And he's like, I want... And what's interesting is that Seiya was going to go to Kurosaki without Kyudo and without Minato anyway. But Minato decided to go because they had a good archery team. So it's curious how things flip. You have Minato decided to go to Kurosaki along with Seiya, but then Seiya decided to go to Kazumai along with Minato. But the thing about it is that Seiya was going to Kurosaki for his own reasons, and Minato was as well. But when Minato decided to go to Kazumai, Seiya only went because of Misato. Seiya didn't go for his own reasons. So that's the big difference now from before, right? And I like that they talk about him following through. And he's like, we don't have much time before the match. And Kaido's just like, everybody's getting target panic. And now it's like, quit being a pessimist. Stop it. He's like, quit it. Don't be like that. And then he's like, he'll do better when Minato's back, I'm sure. And that causes him to like, I love that Tommy Sensei and Kaido both go, what do you know that we don't know? And now it's like, I'm just joking. Sorry. So now he's super perceptive, knows that Seiya has this bond with Minato. And Ryohei knows it too. He knows it too. But Kaido and Tommy Sensei are like, we didn't know this. It's like, oh. And then Masa-san shows up. And I love that Ryohei's like, watch my form. He's like, oh, okay. He's like, sure. And then he sees like, oh. And Masa instantly is like, where's Minato? Like, he just instantly like lights up. Like, where is he at? And they said he'd be late. And then he notices. And that look, when Masa has that look, seeing how many shots Seiya has missed, he's like, Like, everybody knows. No secret. Everybody knows Seiya's feelings towards Minato. Uh-huh. Because I know I can tell you, Seiya's lost a lot of motivation since last winter. He's listless. That's when we started talking about taking Kazumai's entrance exam instead of riding the Kurosaki escalator. And Minato doesn't really realize how serious this is with Seiya. Minato doesn't understand how serious it is. He's just like, oh yeah. He's like, that surprised me too. He does seem a little different. And the dad seems kind of like, well, I don't know what he's thinking. I can't talk to him. I am a little worried about Seiya because Seiya does not seem like he's in a good mindset at all. He was never much of a talkative child. And Minato's like, no, it's fine. He's like, I'm sure Seiya's working through things in his own way. Or he's not. Or he's like spiraling. One of those two. But the dad's like happy about that. He's like, oh, okay. Well, look at you. I hope you're right. And then I guess he has like his bags and stuff on his back. But new light comes with new shadows. And so Masa Sensei, he takes Seiya aside to try to like And the thing of it is, I feel like Masa is not like his grandpa in this moment. He thinks that he's acting like him by the end of the episode, but I don't think he is. He tries to be nice to say, he's like, hey, let's go over here and practice with these targets. He's like, how about you try some makiwara? Let's just... And Seiya knows that he's off, right? But he's just mad right now. He's like, your left hand seems a little tense. I think you're pushing on it too much. This isn't like you, Seiya. And then Seiya's like, what? It feels normal. Yeah, Seiya is like dropping all pretenses. He's like, no, I'm always like this. And it's like, oh shit. He's like, I'm always feeling like this. I've just put up a really good front, but now I can't take it anymore. And it's like, He's like, really? He's like, it seems like you're forcing it. And that clench of his fist, he's like, this is not what I'm forcing. What I'm forcing is acting like everything's okay. And it's like, oh my God. He's like, are we finished here? Can I go back to the targets? And Masa's like, sure, I guess. And Kaido's just like, I feel like Kaido is going to be the one to like smack Seiya and just be like, get over yourself. Like, I feel like Kaido's going to be the one to like try to smack some sense into him literally. But, oh my gosh. And so they say it's raining and that they need to leave. But it's like Seiya doesn't want to leave until Minato comes back. And then we go back to that moment where the thing of it was that Minato, he was practicing archery with the umbrella, and he didn't bring one for himself. He only brought it for his mom and had the bicycle waiting on her to show up. And he says, are you going somewhere? And he's like, I'm just bringing Mom her umbrella. It looks like it might rain. And then he's like, well, where's yours? And he's like, oh, well, I forgot to bring my own. He's like, I just brought this one. And for a second, I was like, I thought Seiya was going to, like, offer him to, like, walk with him. He's like, I got to fire a bow for the first time today. He's like, oh. Because they're a little bit older now. He's like, are you going to tell her? And he's like, yeah. I want my own yugake and stuff if I get into Kurosaki. The glove thing. He's like, yeah, the glove thing. So he wasn't at Kurosaki. He was still, like, in grade school. So he was in grade school. And had just fired an arrow and wanted to tell his mom. Kiyoani, don't you do this. Do not do this. I was like, I've watched Violet Evergarden. I've watched Free. Free doesn't really have any sad moments, but I saw my eyes out during Violet Evergarden for like 3/4 of the season. Don't you start this now. No. I was like, no. I was like, don't you dare think you're going to make me cry. Because, yeah, he was going to tell her all about it. And he came to walk her home. And then he's like, oh, I'm here for other reasons. We just happened to run into each other. So, yeah. Which it wouldn't have made a difference. She came out at the same time. She's like, we better get home fast. And he's like, I better go too. And then he says, be careful. So now here's the thing, though. They're walking to the crosswalk. And he says, Minato. And then he just smiles at him like, and yeah. But then they got hit by a car. No! Oh my God. No wonder Seiya feels awful. You expect me to wait for episode 10. And so Seiya expects that he wants them to leave. And he says, I can't afford to drag us down at the tournament. And Kaido's like, well, we're sorry. He's like, don't push yourself too hard. He's like, sure, thanks. And so he goes back out there and is just looking at the targets and everything. And then Masa tries to like figure out what's wrong. And then because he senses him coming, and he's like, oh, you're still here. And then Seiya's like, yeah. He's like, oh, did I startle you? I'm sorry. Like, he's like, Masa didn't do anything wrong. Because he's like, oh, because he like smiles. He's like, hey. He's like, it's going to be okay. He's like, hey, Seiya. And so he's like, do you love Kyudo? And this is like the part that's like, because it seems like Masa, to Seiya, Masa's doing what Shu was doing, right? But that's not it. Because he's asking him, and Seiya's like, why would you ask? What's that supposed to mean? He's like, I just had another kid that I'm jealous of tell me the same thing. What's up? And he's like, well, it's none of my business, but archers get lost now and then. And as long as we love it, we can always find our way back. And the thing of, and that's what gets him is like, Seiya, it's like all Masa means, because I'm coaching right now myself, and we actually had this conversation, the other coach that I coach with, she did this really cool activity where she had everybody on the team, she had them all do an activity where she said, okay, write out what your goal this semester is. Now write out this semester what your goal was, what's your goal next semester, and then why do you love this activity? And she said basically the same thing that Masa did. She was like, whenever you feel lost, you go back to your goals and you go back to why you enjoy this activity, and that will help to anchor you and pull you through if you're doubting yourself. And I was like, oh, that's a really cool activity. That's basically what Masa's trying to do. Masa's trying to say, hey, you love Kyudo, right? So if you're lost, just think back to those things, right? But Seiya, who's just heard from Shu, like, well, you don't love this activity, so you don't belong here, it takes it the wrong way. And he's like, and then Masa says, well, that's how it was for Minato. He's like, Minato struggled like you are, but he's pulling through. It'll be okay. And I love that Seiya, he thinks back to Shu, and then he looks at Minato with Masa, and you can just see, he just feels like, Seiya's like, I've stuck by Minato's side all these years, even though I didn't like this activity at all, but I stuck with him. And I didn't get him out of his funk. I'm not his motivator. It's this guy and you. So where does that leave me? And Masa's like, that's all I wanted to say. Masa's like, I'm just trying to give you some friendly advice from your coach. And Seiya's like, do I love Kyudo? And Masa's just like, he has this look on his face like, oh, okay. And then he thinks back, and the way that he says it, you see the one guy, his grandfather, yelling at Masa. And Masa's just like, oh no. Masa's like, oh shit, you're not happy. And I know what that feels like, because I was there. It's like, oh no. He's like, I don't know. He's like, but one thing I do know is that I hate you. Oh. And Masa's like, oh. And Masa probably knows exactly what he feels like, but he doesn't know the context. Oh. And for Masa, he's like, did I just screw up? Did I just do something my grandpa did that I said I would never do? And it's like, I don't know how you could have done that. It's like, God, dang it. Kiwani, why you gotta bring the angst in the rain? And then Minato shows up and he's just like, and Minato's like, what's up? He's like, hey, Seiya, you're everybody left. And he's like, yeah, they went home. Oh. And he's like, oh, club's over already, right? He's like, I guess so, since it's raining. He's like, Seiya, don't you need an umbrella? And he just walks past him. And I was like, oh. And then that's all we get. I was like, I hate it. God, Kiwani, why you gotta bring the angst in? Why couldn't we just have nice things? Why couldn't we have nice, happy things? Why you gotta do this to us? Why? Why? No. Oh, no. So, yeah. What can we do? What can we do? It's so frustrating. I just want nice things and we can't have them. So there's that. But damn it. And the thing of it is, like, you know why Seiya is the way that he is. But it's just like there's this little edge of miscommunication. And I'm like, no, I don't want Masa to feel bad. I don't want Minato to feel bad. I don't want Seiya. I don't want any of these guys to feel bad. They got the tournament to do. Damn can wait. I don't think I can wait for episode 10. I'm probably gonna have to watch it because I need to know. I don't want to be spoiled. I need to know. So dang it. Man. What are we gonna do? So I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below. Please no spoilers or hints or clues, but man, I felt like what a arrow to the heart finding out the backstory, the whole thing with the accident. Like it's all coming to light. We got this love triangle. Masa, I feel for him because he didn't really do anything wrong, but oh man. And now we gotta take care of all this with 3 episodes left. 3 episodes. Is it 3 in an OVA? Is that what we've got left? I feel like we've got 13 episodes in an OVA. Okay. We've got 13 episodes in an OVA left, so... Oh, God. Or is it 12? I'm actually going to go back and see how many episodes we've got left. We've got 13 episodes in an OVA. Oh, my gosh. Well, what do we do? So, in any case... I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 10 of Tsurune. Bye.